As we wait for all participants and experts to join, may we have the Urban Act video. I would request Secretariat to please play the video.
Gazing upon our world from a distance, it appears peaceful and calm. But the reality is far different. The repercussions of climate change are approaching us all, and we all contribute to this impact. By 2050, projections indicate that over 3 billion people will reside in various urban centers in the Asia-Pacific region alone. Urban activities are a key contributor to climate change. Cities are responsible for 75% of global CO2 emissions, with transport and buildings among the most significant contributors. And since 2012, the Asia-Pacific region has collectively been responsible for more than half of global greenhouse gas emissions yearly. The repercussions of climate change are imminent and befalling us all. Several Asian countries are among the top 10 countries most affected by climate change, with the Philippines ranked the 4th, India ranked the 7th, and Thailand ranked the 9th. It's time to act, and we have a joint responsibility to address climate change through urban development planning and design guided by climate data. That's where Urban Act comes in. Urban Act, or the Integrated Urban Climate Action for Low Carbon and Resilient Cities project, is a regional project that aims to support the transformation towards low carbon and resilient urban development and contribute to implementing each partner country's nationally determined contributions and the Sustainable Development Goals. Funded by the International Climate Initiative, or ICI, commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, or BMWK, Urban Act is implemented in 5 partner countries: China, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, with a duration spanning 5 years from 2022 to 2027. We aim to achieve 4 critical outputs. These outputs include improving the institutional environment for climate-sensitive urban development, using evidence-based, inclusive, climate-sensitive, spatial and urban planning, identifying project concepts for urban climate action investment, and enhancing knowledge through regional networking, exchange, and learning. Our collaborative partnership comprises the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit GmbH, or GIZ, as a project leader, and the international partners consisting of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP, United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific, or UCLG ASPAC, the University of Stuttgart, and TU Dortmund University, and national partners in each of the project countries. To promote and showcase a sustainable integration of climate change into urban development, Urban Act implements its support in 14 pilot cities across the 5 countries, recognizing the unique context of the partner countries and aiming to improve the country's specific policies and regulatory frameworks. Furthermore, we engage in joint operations with the Indonesia-Malaysia-Thailand Growth Triangle, or IMTGT, implementing initiatives in 6 cities within the IMTGT sub-region. We are all standing on the edge, and every decision and action we take today will shape our future for generations to come. It is not just a choice, it's a collective responsibility that falls on each of our shoulders. It's time for us to unite and journey towards low-carbon, resilient urban development. Join us in the Urban Act, Joint Action for Climate-Friendly and Resilient Cities. We are stronger if we are together.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you
video.
for the video.
And as
And
mentioned,
as
that
mentioned, that
this is the time to
it's the time
take the
to take
action.
the action.
And
And
warm well,
when
sorry, there is
sorry,
some echo.
there is some echo.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
warm
so
greetings to
warm
all the
greetings to all
participants
the
here.
participants here.
And
And
I welcome you all
I
to this
welcome you all to
webinar
this
of climate
webinar of
sensitive urban
climate
planning,
sensitive urban
challenges and
planning, challenges
opportunities
and
for setting the
opportunities
right
for setting the
frameworks
right
for
frameworks
climate
for
action. So
climate
this
action.
is a
This is
webinar under the
are
series
under
of
the
webinar which
series
are
of
being
webinar which
launched
are being
under Urban
launched
Act
under
project.
Urban Act project.
And the aim
And
is to
the aim is to
strengthen the
strengthen
knowledge sharing
the
and
knowledge
learning
sharing and
approach
learning
amongst
approach
regional
amongst
and national
regional and national
level of
level
different
of
governments
different
in the
governments
Urban Act
in
partner
the Urban Act
countries.
partner
And
countries.
by this
And
webinar, we
by
are
this
leveraging
webinar, we
the
are leveraging
expertise
the
of partners
expertise of
across
partners
various Urban
across
Act
various
project,
Urban Act
across
project, across
the various partners
the
of our
various
Urban Act
partners of our
project.
Urban Act
And
project.
this is
And
the
this is
timely
the
opportunity
timely
to bring
opportunity to
together the
bring
diverse,
together the
relevant
diverse
perspectives from different organizations, institutions, and experts within and outside the project. And the key objectives of
objectives.
these webinar series is to increase the knowledge and understanding of participants to build integrated climate action for low carbon and resilient cities. We also aim to communicate and raise awareness of key innovations and emerging topics on action for low carbon and resilient cities. And the aim is to build and enhance the partnerships among Urban Act Project Consortium and with relevant organizations, institutes, and experts outside the Urban Act project partners. Also, we aim to showcase the best practices, learnings, and innovations through Urban Act project to wider audience so as to meet the greater goal. So in this webinar, we will try to focus on the climate sensitive urban planning, and there are upcoming webinars on different range of relevant topics where we will aim to uh, include the climate sensitive climate assessment methodologies, scorecards for different countries. Also, the focus would be given on gender and social inclusion for climate action, and we look forward for participation from different organizations and different cities. In the current webinar, we had over 240 registrations, and we are glad that there is participation from all the partner countries and beyond. And you might have noted during the registration process, there were some questions which were asked. The aim of those questions was to help the organization team and expert speakers to make sure that the content is as relevant as possible. And the intention is that we've built these webinars in more practical oriented way so that the actions can be taken at subnational and local levels, whatever learnings are there from these webinars. And we aim to deliver the wider aspects of these webinars to all the wider audience. Some housekeeping remarks: that please note that the webinars are recorded, and the slides and the recording would be available after the webinar. And all the participants can feel free to use the chat box during the webinar to interact with each other. And if you have specific questions related to experts and panels, please use Q&A function to write your questions to the panelists. Participation certificates will also be available. For that, you would have to fill a feedback form, which will be circulated by the end of this webinar. So this topic, which we are talking about regarding the climate sensitive and urban planning, uh, and the challenges and opportunities for setting up the right frameworks, this is a very relevant topic when we talk about the rate of urbanization in the current scenario. According to UN report, by 2050, every 2 out of 3 people are likely to be living in the cities. And as this gives a big challenge, this is also a great opportunity for us to move together in a way to achieve the climate action. And this projected increase in urban population is linked with the multifaceted issues which can come in the urban areas related to resource consumption, energy utilization, land usage, and development of infrastructure and transportation system. So all these aspects give us an excellent opportunity to accelerate the climate action by doing the things in right direction. So that would be the agenda for today's webinar. And some of the questions which were targeted or which were posed during the registration process were talking about the harmonization of different levels of governance and the integration of different levels of governance for climate action. So, well, talking about this and different sectors, it gives me pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, Mr. Andhika Ajay, who is currently serving as the head of Center for Research and Innovation at Regional Development and Planning Agency with Jakarta government. And his cross-sectoral experience and different roles of education and sports and youth positions will be a great benefit for the audience today to understand the cross-sectoral cooperation and how Jakarta has moved forward in the journey towards climate action. So his knowledge and expertise would be great for the learning of different panel members and different participants here. So without wasting much time, handing over the floor to Mr. Andhika Ajay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Andhika Ajay. I'm the head of the Center for Research and Innovation of Regional Urban Planning Agency. Sorry, we are now in praying time, so please take a moment because it's very loud in every room has a speaker on it. I'm so really sorry.
Ashita, maybe we can move to Professor Berkman if he's available and come back to Pak Andika if that's possible. Apologies,
Yes,
everybody.
sure. Yes, I think that would be great. We can move to Professor Berkman for his talk and his experiences.
Sure. Would be
Yeah,
nice to have my slides. Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, Professor Jan Berkman. So it's great to have you on board with us. And as it would be better to have the academic knowledge and the research experience that you have gone through all these years regarding the urban and different aspects of urbanization that can be shared with our partner countries. A brief introduction about Professor Berkman for all the participants. Professor Berkman is a professor in University of Stuttgart. He is working on urban resilience since past many years. He was also the lead author for sixth assessment report of IPCC, which makes it even more relevant for all the participants to get his knowledge and his experiences. And apart from that, he has been working about the dynamics and interactions between cities and urban development, as well as the climate action associated with urban development. So without taking much time, I think we can give the floor to Professor Berkman, and he can share his research and his experiences with the audience.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. As indicated, I think from the participant list, it's a great pleasure that we have various colleagues also from local governments. Actually, I have been working for the tsunami, which is nearly 20 years ago. So therefore, I know also some of the locations which were highlighted, like the city of Padang, or also some parts in other parts of the region. I would like to give you a short introduction into climate sensitive planning, actually what we understand from, or what do we do in Central Europe, but also maybe what is relevant if you think about new digital products. So beside climate change, I think also urbanization and digitalization are three important megatrends that we have to consider when we talk about future urban development. Next slide, please. One of the core findings actually also of the IPCC report, when we started a report in 2012 called IPCC threats report, so the management of risk due to extreme events. I think the emphasis was often focusing on whether extreme events will actually have severe consequences. I think we are in 2023, now 2024, we are a step further. We actually already see that we have severe impacts of climate change. And for example, in the last IPCC assessment report, the sixth assessment report, but also the synthesis report, in various world regions, we observe impacts. I mean, normally impacts were considered to have positive and negative consequences. You might have some positive consequences due to climate change, but this figure, all the red parts show that you have adverse consequences, so negative consequences on inland flooding, storm, in coastal areas. That's particularly relevant for many regions in Sumatra, in, for example, various islands in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. And also we see more and more economic damages and livelihood disruptions due to climate change. But next slide, please. The other question is a bit, how do we actually can tackle this problem? On the one hand, it's important to better understand climate information, also climate scenarios in the future. So, for example, what will be the sea level rise, the land subsidence in Jakarta in 2040, 2050? We know from cities like Semarang, if you're still in thinking about Indonesia, that land is shrinking, that land use plays an important role. And therefore, it's for us also quite important actually to link this information into one tool. So to think about how can we better represent aspects of climate hazards, for example, heat stress, heavy precipitation events, but also flooding, normal flooding from the river, but at the same time, better understanding different dynamics of exposure. So how many people are exposed to heat stress, when, where in the city, what kind of dynamics do we see? And next to exposure, it's also important to better understand human and physical vulnerability. For example, how exposed, you can map how exposed different hospitals or schools are to flooding, but it would be also quite important to better understand how prepared are they? What is their level of vulnerability if you think about, for example, structural physical vulnerability? And here we try, for example, to develop a tool at the moment also here in Germany, but also with the partner cities in URBACT, on how to bring together this new climate information, future land use changes, and dynamics of exposure and vulnerability. And here, for example, look at age groups. In Germany, we have a huge aging process. And here we look at the population over 65 years. We look at the low-income households. That's also particularly relevant, I think, for some cities in Asia, because they have less adaptive capacity. And then we try to also better understand adaptive capacity, where people can go for or to receive more protection. Next slide, please. In this regard, we also try to map this information at a local scale, but also considering regional or city hinterland interactions. For example, if you think about big cities, doesn't matter whether Jakarta or Jabodetabek, this is a larger urban region. If you think about cities in Thailand or in the Philippines, most cities have a close interaction with their hinterland, not only in terms of, for example, commuting patterns, people are going to work, but also in terms, for example, of cold air streams that buffer a bit the heat stress in a city. And therefore, it's quite important to differentiate here at a spatial scale, for example, risk levels, but also to identify, for example, sensitive and critical infrastructures that are relevant for more than a specific population in one ward. For example, here we see the river of the Neckar. It's highly regulated, but at the same time, you have heavy precipitation events that run down the mountain areas and then can impact these sensitive infrastructures. And this is quite important for us to better understand where are most or where are significant portions of these critical and sensitive infrastructures exposed, and how well prepared are these infrastructures to buffer and to cope with the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. In addition, we try to use these digital tools as indicated. That would be also something we are interested in the URMAC project at a later stage. How can you visualize, for example, changes that occur at the city regional level? Here, it's the entire region of Stuttgart, for example. The same is potentially true if you think about climate change impacts. And here, for example, these new digital tools would allow us to better model, to better visualize actually this information. This helps us to also underscore what are the interdependencies between, for example, heat stress, increasing heat stress and demographic change, or how important are, for example, green belts that come from the hinterland into the city itself. And this kind of visualization tools and also digitalization as a planning process itself is helpful, because more and more, I think we are moving towards a more digital world. Next slide, please. One of the major events actually also here in Germany and was that, for example, a major heavy precipitation event caused major flooding and killed actually more than 130 people alone in this valley called R Valley. And you see from the photos some of the destruction and destruction of such a rail bridge, or, for example, the destruction of various houses, indicates that we also have to rethink a little bit our approaches on how to deal with flooding. Normally, we assume that flooding occurs not very frequently, and that you can, so for example, here in the map, that you can identify specific lines of flood lines, for example, so-called 100-year flood events. That would be normally the legal protection standard here in Central Europe for preventing that these areas which could be impacted by a 100-year flood are urbanized. But what we are seeing more and more, that these lines are changing. So the past, where we calculated the 100 years flood event based on historic floods, is not anymore sufficiently valid. And you see the blue line, that's the HQ 100 line, so this 100 years flood line. Actually, in the event in 2021 was significantly higher. And here the question is also, to what extent are you or are we actually achieving a retreat? Is it useful to relocate these houses? What kind of implication has that for the functionality of cities and villages? And what are other approaches? One of the challenges was actually also that a lot of material and water accumulated in front of bridges, and then the bridges broke and was like a tsunami. So the wave was even 2 meters higher, with a lot of material, cars in it, trees in it. And this also shows we have to think more about what actually this water transports, rather than just thinking about the depths of the water. Next slide, please. In addition, we are trying here also to think about how to use these extreme events. So we had various extreme events also in cities that are present here in the online call. And we are trying to also scientifically support the idea to rebuild in a more resilient way. And that's not very easy, because most of the mechanisms we know, be it the global funding mechanisms on extreme events or disaster risk reduction after extremes or loss and damage programs, often perceive that you replace the damage. But just replacing damages would not be sufficient, because if you rebuild a school in the same way, very exposed to flooding, it doesn't make too much sense. So here, the federal government, for example, provided 33 billion euros, which is quite a lot for a rural area in Germany. And we are trying to identify areas or also time spans when you can actually promote resilience building of cities, for example, in the area of reconstruction of lifelines here, protecting or developing higher protection standards for critical infrastructures, but also thinking about the relocation, for example, of homes for elderly, kindergartens or schools. And this also is, I think, quite interesting because you have different entry points for resilience building also after a disaster, while at the same time there's a huge pressure. A lot of institutions are not working when there was just an extreme event, and therefore you have to prepare actually beforehand. Next slide, please. Then we come to some take-home messages or key aspects I think our research shows. And for example, in cities in Asia, I've worked also quite a long time in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. But here, for example, my feeling is at the moment we are seeing this I mean, definitely important need to adapt cities to make them more climate resilient, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, more and more digital products enter into urban and city development and communication. So WhatsApp or whatever, TikTok or whatever you use in your countries is quite a strong, for example, modifier of the communication, and therefore also digitalization provides an opportunity for us to accelerate the information about climate change, climate resilience. In addition, I think it's not sufficient if we just look at climate hazards. So if you map the city of Manila with coastal storms or sea level rise, that gives you an impression of how high the challenge is. But at the same time, we have to better understand differential patterns of exposure. Who is exposed when in a city? How far are you exposed to heat stress when you commute to work and not just when you are at home? And here in this regard, I think we have also to move towards a better identification of priority areas for intervention. That means you have to rethink a little bit old maps that just look at the hazard part, but better understanding what are future development strategies of cities, how dynamic is the population, what is a day and nighttime population, etc. In addition, there's an important need for intermunicipal cooperation, particularly if you have smaller cities, but even with big cities like Jakarta and the neighboring cities, or like Bacolod or other cities. I think here it's important, and also here is a venue for it, and ESCAP is doing a good job here, actually exchanging experiences, trying to cooperate. If you talk about flood risk management, it's often the watershed that matters, and therefore a city has to cooperate with its hinterland. In terms of climate resilient reconstruction, I think we see from our Central European perspective at the moment, but that's actually also true for most of the flood maps I know in Asia. We often look at the past. We look at flooding in Bangkok and look at the past, how high it was. But we have to potentially modify this thinking and have to assess, for example, what could happen if there are more extreme events. What does it mean then for building codes? Can we allow single, for example, how many floors does a house need in a flood-prone area in order to ensure vertical evacuation? And also this HQ 100 line, often used as a regulation in planning, I think is not sufficient because it looks very much into the past, but this might mean that you have to modify this HQ 100 line as a binding rule, for example, into the future, because in the future, these flood events that can occur will be more extreme, and therefore higher protection standards are needed. That doesn't mean that you have to relocate entire cities, but it means that you have to think about protection standards for different types of land uses in a city. Last but not the last point I think here is that also the potential multifunctional land use is quite important. We have often understanding that green spaces are important for recreation, but they might need to be qualified also in terms of adaptive capacities for heat stress. That means shaded green space, and maybe also for flooding or heavy precipitation. So what kind of uses has this green space or have different settlement structures then in the context of climate change and so-called extreme events? With this regard, next slide, I would like to close. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. This is a photo actually from the reconstruction process here in the R Valley. You see the mountains, you see a building behind my person, and this is all empty 3 years after the event. So we're still rebuilding the R Valley after this extreme event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Berkman. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience regarding the development of vulnerability maps. And the importance of vulnerability and exposure maps is great when we are talking about climate action in urban cities. Dubai is another example of the recent incidences which have impacted the cities because of the heavy flooding or precipitation. And the online tool for spatial planning, which you have mentioned, definitely it is a great learning. And just something I wish to ask regarding the climate resilience and urban planning with respect to the recent reconstruction which you have shared in your last slide. Uh, how well in Europe, or how well during your experiences, you think that different levels of government play a role, or how we can actually instigate the reconstruction process or rehabilitation process, considering the uh, urban resilience, or considering the climate action, how well we can work in that regard. If you can share your experiences during the reconstruction process.
Yes, maybe one remark. I mean, it's a little bit like similar, like building up a tsunami early warning system for Asia when we were discussing the warning center in Jakarta. I mean, a lot of institutions would believe that they could work with themselves, or they could deal with the problem on their own. But for example, for the reconstruction, it's quite clear that we need, for example, higher funding rates for cooperative projects. It's not sufficient if we just say we replace every municipality, every actor can work on its own. For example, in terms of the resilience building, it's important that projects with cooperation between municipalities and actors would get higher funding levels. So you have to actively stimulate cooperation. And this is not sufficiently done yet. And I think also in other regions I've worked in, I think you have sometimes, for example, a strong decentralization process, if you think about Indonesia, but then the local governments don't have the funding that would be needed to deal with all the tasks. Vice versa, if you're in Vietnam, it's a very centralized system in part. And here, I think it's important that you create incentives for cross-level cooperation along different governance levels. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bergman. That's a great note to take from this last comment, that we can involve incentives when we are talking about cross-sectoral or multi-level integration amongst different governments. So thank you, Professor Bergman. Shall we take the questions right now or after the presentation of Mr. Andika? I think we can have few questions right now. So some attendee have mentioned that since there is dry season going on in Philippines and high heat index is observed across the country, this is true for coastal areas and highly urbanized areas also, that we are experiencing El Nino here. So do you have some recommendations on as how to curb or help to ease this in future? This is specifically for Professor Bergman, I guess.
Yeah, difficult question. I mean, definitely at a certain level, if you see now the heat or the temperatures, for example, in certain parts of India, it's very, very hot. So it's actually not very comfortable to stay outside during lunchtime or in the afternoon. On the other hand, it's also not very recommendable just to stay at home and buy air conditioning. So I think for urban development, it would be quite important maybe to promote or the access or accessibility to shaded green spaces, maybe also to cool places if there are certain buildings that provide more cooling function. And this is maybe a certain buffering effect. If it gets more and more hot, then it will be quite difficult. But definitely, I think green spaces, areas where you can, which can be used for recreation, for communication, also in the afternoon when the sun is not so hot anymore, or the heat is reducing. That's quite important, I think, to have a lively and livable city. But definitely, I mean, there are definitely competitions about land use. If you think about the land use or the square meter price in central Jakarta and in Ho Chi Minh City or in Manila, you wouldn't find too many private investors who would say, I would like to make a green park instead of a shopping center. But I think here promoting this quality also that shaded green space offers for buffering heat stress is quite important. And maybe last remark, if you think about coastal cities, normally coasts have wind. And then it makes a lot of sense if we consider the wind as an element for cooling. I mean, as your ventilation. If you have a more higher wind speed in a city, in a coastal area, it doesn't feel that hot as it would be if you close this, for example. That means you have to think about building heights, ventilation processes within a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Berkman. Thank you for your insights. There would be few more questions, but we'll move to those questions at the end of the session. So moving to the next expert session, and we are delighted to welcome Mr. Andika Ajay. As we have mentioned that he's working as a senior bureaucrat in government of Jakarta, and his cross-sectoral integration with different ministries and different organizations will be a great learning experience as he share about the journey of Jakarta towards climate action. Over to you, Mr. Andika. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. I'm sorry because there was a praying time in Jakarta, so it's really loud and I cannot continue
That's okay.
at that time. So my name is Andika Aji. I'm the head of the Center for Research and Innovation of Regional Development and Planning Agency of Jakarta City. So I will share about Jakarta, how Jakarta cope with the climate change and then urban resilience. Next slide, please. Okay, as you know, Jakarta was or formerly Indonesia's capital city. So by this year, we already relocate our capital to another place like in Kalimantan area, so called Nusantara. So Jakarta will be positioned as the center for economic growth and also the global city in Indonesia. So as many other cities in the world, so Jakarta also face the climate change issue since many people feel in this world that the global temperature is warm and then also make our climate change. And as a coastal area, Jakarta feel the impact of the climate change. First of all, Jakarta suffer for the high sea level, high of the this time point. So the sea level rise and make a flood in the northern part of Jakarta, and also from hinterland, Jakarta also facing the flood also. Not only the flood issues, Jakarta also facing the urban heat island in many part of Jakarta. So with the more than 10 million inhabitants live in Jakarta, and then not all of them has adequate living space. So most of the people in here are threatened to the climate change impact. So as a government, we already participate to make our citizen to be more resilient to this climate change impact. So next slide, please. So Jakarta has many works to be the more resilience, as you see in this slide, that Jakarta officially joined the C40 in 2007, I mean. So, and we have already committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 30% in 2030. So, and then we have so many plan to, and then also we have climate issue also integrated in our midterm plan, and then also in the long-term plan, and also in the annual planning of Jakarta City. And by 2020, Jakarta also established the climate task force as a climate governance level. So we also developed the regional low carbon development plan in 2021, and then also hopefully this action will reduce 30% of greenhouse emission reduction by 2030. And then also another milestone for Jakarta for the low carbon development is to aim the net zero emission by 2050. Next slide. And then all of this action in Indonesia term should be integrated with our planning and development document. So in the long-term regional plan for Jakarta as a province, we also integrated in the spatial plan of Jakarta, and also integrated again with the midterm, our midterm development plan. So actually, between the long term and then the middle term planning, also the issue of the climate change also become attention for everyone in Jakarta. In the ministerial level also, they have a special arrangement in the planning for the climate change issues, and also in our side, in the local government, that issue also delivered in our planning and development document, like that. So actually, Jakarta has many initiatives for the climate change issues. Actually, we also are creating the climate kampong. Kampong is mean the small area of in the urban area in Jakarta, and also for the sea level rise, we also construct the seawall in the northern part of Jakarta, and also as many other cities, we also facing the land subsidence because of the groundwater extraction. So we are implement the prohibition of groundwater extraction, and then also we build many green and also the blue open space area, and also many others initiatives that can improve the quality of life of Jakarta, and also to increase the resiliency of Jakarta city society and or the people, like that. So the next slide, please. And we have two terms of Jakarta climate action plan, and then we have a mitigation part, and also we have an adaptation part. Like we have to mitigate many other issues related to the climate changes. So, like for example, we have the policy to energy efficiency in commercial buildings and also energy efficiency in industrial and green building policy. That's for the mitigation part. For the adaptation part, we are preparing the climate event result in a minimal casualties in the health, because as you know, the temperature of the world nowadays is getting higher and higher. The peak is maybe in 1 or 2 months before, when we experience the more than 40 degree of the temperature in Jakarta. So we are preparing the people in Jakarta to be ready before that happen. That's why I agree with Professor Birkman that the digitalization is important to give information to our society and to our people to be ready before that happen like that. So back to the slide, that also the transportation issue also become our attention to mitigate the disaster or the climate change impact, because public transportation expansion that we are now still doing it is also play part as a big part of the climate change reduction. And also the land use control, also our adaptation issues, and also the solid waste management also become our mitigation for the climate action plan 2021 to 2050. So, and also the protecting against the climate risk is our adaptation for the Jakarta. Next slide, please. And for the partnership of the climate resilience, we also believe in the this kind of pentahelix, like we have a community of Jakarta city, and also we have academics, we have media, we have businesses, and also we have government. These stakeholders also play key roles to build the resiliency in Jakarta city. For example, the government, we have the part to make a policy. We have the power to make the rules. We have the power to make the policy, and then to ensure that the climate change adaptation, climate change resilience could be addressed in our city. And also, we cannot, the government itself cannot work alone. We have to collaborate. We have to synergize our effort with other stakeholders. The community itself, they have a responsibility to participate in the climate resilience. For example, many citizens prefer to use the private car, and then that's not good for our earth. So it can make a global heat and urban heat, and also the emission. And then at the end of the day, the climate can change more fast than we can expect. And then also the academic in university, they can deliver their research, and then also the experiences, like Professor Berkman, for example, that the research can justify or can support the policy making part. So the policy should be like evidence and also research-based policy. So that's how it works in Jakarta. And also media also play important part because the media socialize many our policy and also can educate our community, can educate our citizen how to cope with the climate issues like that. And also the businesses. Business also play a key role in climate resilience issues because I believe like Professor said that the government cannot fund everything for every case for every problems. That's why the businesses, the society, academic, the media also, and us as a government should collaborate. We have our own specialty, like the power of making the policy, and also the people that can contribute in many households can contribute to the reduction of the climate issues impact like that. So that's how this pentahelix issue can cope with the climate resilience in Jakarta. Next slide. I think that's I can share about Jakarta for this time being. I'm also very happy to answer if you have any question for my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to Ashita.
Thank you, Mr. Andika. Thank you for sharing the comprehensive plan for Jakarta. I think the participants had got the great learning experiences from your first-hand experience at the local and subnational level. And considering, since we were talking about the budget, there are certain questions which you can answer very well. So the very first and the most voted question here is that for the cities which are having limited budget, so what climate adaptation strategy should we prioritize for easy win when we are talking about climate action?
In my opinion, the government itself, they should, like I mentioned before, that government should collaborate with many stakeholders that, like I said, pentahelix. So it depends on how the government to ask or to persuade many other stakeholders to collaborate each other. For example, if I may address the Jakarta case. For example, in when the disaster happened in Jakarta, so many people, so many companies want to volunteer, want to donate, for example, donate food or donate blanket or many other things to the victim of the disaster. That's that's happened in Jakarta case. Another experience is in Jakarta. As we all know that in 2020 up to 2021 or 22, all of us experience with COVID-19, right? Every cities, every nation get impacted with the virus. So at the time point, our city government asked to many other stakeholders, many other stakeholders to collaborate with us to help to help the people, to help the medical workers, and then many company donate their the mask for the medical workers, and also many things. So that's happened. So how the government to persuade the other stakeholder, it's play a key role in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for your insights regarding that. That's true that all the stakeholders should come together, and private partners, they have to play a bigger role when we are talking about the budgets. So thank you, Mr. Antika. The floor is now open for question answer session, and please type your question answers in the inbox, or you may send us through the chat session as well. So regarding the same question over to Professor Bergman, if you can answer about the climate adaptation strategies, which should be the first priority when we are talking about the cities which are having low budget.
Yeah, not an easy answer, right? You don't have information, you don't have budget. I think what my colleague from Jakarta mentioned, I think is also quite important. Maybe you have to think then about corporations, so that some people who have an interest in whatever, a livable city, or trying to better understand how to reduce potential losses and damages. So some businesses, but also maybe schools, are a potential good cooperation partner if you have a low budget, because I mean, at least from the tsunami we know in Indonesia, if we're taking Indonesia from a case study again, that's the drilling in schools, is preparation, that people, the sensitive, or to make people aware that they have to get better prepared. And then, for example, schools and mosques were quite important, or religious leaders were quite important multiplicators. On the other hand, I think it's important to have an integrative perspective. I think it's not sufficient if we just look at water, or I mean, as indicated for the city of Jakarta, land subsidence, groundwater extraction, saltwater intrusion, urban development patterns are quite important. And my feeling is also Jakarta is quite big, so we have to be a bit careful not trying to solve everything in Jakarta with climate change adaptation. This wouldn't work. If the airport is still available when climate change happens, that would be good, and maybe some other things too. But here also there are different responsibilities. For example, the government of Jakarta is potentially responsible for some of the local infrastructure, and there are some national infrastructures like the airport, where normally the national government should also support local governments quite strongly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your insights, Professor Bergman. And moving to the next question, which is even more interesting, that if there is limited land area and higher population, then how we can cope up with climate change, and also how we can plan flood risk reduction in such areas if it is a coastal region. So I think both of you can give your inputs regarding the same.
I think due to the limited land area and a high population density, the change in the spatial plan use that can be addressed to so that area can make better, and also have a green spaces. But since Jakarta also has many slums spotted area in here, so we already also struggle with it, because in my opinion, the limited area and land it can be managed if we have more space for the open green space, so the people over there can make but yeah, that's the challenge in every urban area, I think. So we are in Jakarta also, we are still struggle with it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
maybe
Chandika.
the concept of multifunctional land use would be also quite important. I mean, in some cases, you can build houses on spills or
Yes.
stills or
Yeah.
pillars. But on the other hand, I mean, if a fire brigade is on a pillar, it's good. But what happens if the fire brigade is needed? Then they still have to drive through the city. But maybe to rethink a little bit the city, for example, often we have the feeling that we think about a street and it's mainly for cars and the transport of goods. But maybe in terms of flood risk reduction, you have to think about shifting floods through a city over via the main road system. Then you have to rebuild, or you have just to build roads a bit different. And this is maybe an opportunity if you have very limited space, and you have to rethink a bit what are land uses that can be adapted and what are also land uses that can still work under flooding or still can be flooded without major or severe damage. I mean, as my colleague from Jakarta indicated, you might have some slums or very vulnerable population groups that need special protection, or where maybe relocation is actually needed or upgrading. But you might also have some land uses like sport fields where you could say, okay, here these can be used as flooding areas for heavy precipitation if a heavy precipitation event comes. I don't think that, I mean, the competition about land is quite high, even in areas in countries where you have a lot of land. So this is maybe also some specific logic of cities, that there's competition, but not every city looks like Hong Kong, for example.
Yeah, that's true. And if there is, I think we can move towards the threshold level also. Maybe some interventions are required in that level when we are talking about the development. Anyway, so another question when we are talking about the threshold, another question which is related to the basic legal framework and principles for international and local climate change cooperation, which can avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate change system. So what could be the basic legal framework when we are considering that?
Yeah, good
And
question. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I'm rather not easy about legal issues. I mean, we also consider legal issues. My feeling is we have to think of 3 or 4 things. I mean, one you have often local laws, or you have national building codes. These are things where also adaptation goals, adaptation issues need to be integrated in terms of, for example, the structure or protection structures for sensitive and critical infrastructures, for example. On the other hand, I think adaptation is a bit different from mitigation. If you think about CO2 reduction, it's clear we have a global goal like the Paris Agreement. I think in terms of adaptation, we don't have these agreements yet. I mean, we don't have what would be the agreement, how Delhi should look like as an adapted city in 2050. What is the specific standard? Would it be nobody is dying due to heat stress? Is it nobody exposed to floods? So here, I think we have also to think about or rethink protection standards. And these protection standards can not only look at exposure. It won't be possible to prevent people being exposed to heat stress in Asian cities in the future. It will be more important than to say what are certain qualities we want to ensure. For example, how far is your next green space with shaded green spaces? How far can people afford to go into buildings that are cooler? I think these quality goals we need, and in the IPCC we had a discussion stronger whether we have to move these adaptation goals towards human rights. So it's not just a question how the climate is changing, but also what are the basic human rights you have to protect, like the access to water, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Berkman. Actually, this is also answering another question, which was about the green space in Dhaka, where in the informal settlements, we cannot have enough space for establishment of green areas or maybe urban areas. But yes, there are some development plans of spatial planning which can help in that regard. So, Mr. Andika, there was a specific question for Jakarta province. Somebody wanted to know that if the capital city will move from Java province to other province, will the climate resilience city plan will remain the same, or it will change in that scenario?
I believe that must be changed, that because previously we the capital city in Indonesia, but right now we are will be projected as another kind of center of Indonesia. So I believe it will be changed, because one is we can have a flexibility to change our land use, because as you know that the capital will be moved, and then the ministerial offices will be left by the ministerial employee to go over there, so we can change the function to give more spaces, and then also make like transit oriented development. We have MRT right now, so we can develop the area surrounding the station, so we can have an integrated, as Professor Bergman said, that that should be multi-level or compacted area over there. So that must be changes in climate resiliencies in Jakarta, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And this actually brings to the another question, which is about that how Jakarta is dealing with urban heat island, and the similar question is about Philippines, so that they can learn from Jakarta's action in that regard.
Okay. There's many initiatives that we delivered to cope with the urban heat island. One is we initiate the program to use more clean energy for the building. Also, we also implement the green building policy, and also we are persuade our people to use public transportation or green transportation vehicle, and also many. So basically, we are trying to reduce the temperature of the city. That's the point. And then also we have additional, we buy many land to make it like urban parks like that, and then we plan many plants over there, and then like that. So we hope that that will reduce the temperature of the city itself.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Andika. There is a more functional level question that when the city master plans are prepared in certain countries, it is taking like 10 to 15 years for a city master plan to build up. And when we are talking about developing climate sensitive urban cities, so how this time frame can help, or how we can mainstream the climate action in such kind of working environment, or maybe such kind of plannings.
I think in my perspective, that since the issues actually as my role as the head of the Center for Research and Innovation, I also act as the the head of the SDGs teams. So basically, I can integrate the sustainable development goals, and also put issues of climate change to integrate it in our planning document. And then also, since we are facing many challenges related to the climate issues, so everyone in my department, and also everyone in Jakarta city government, realized that something must be done, something must be delivered in our planning. So every planning document in Jakarta city government right now also put more attention in the climate change impact issues. So I think that's one of the key strategies for the local government. And the most important part is the attention from the local government leader is also must, because as you know that the government rely on what the policy that issued by the leader of the local government. That's for example, the elected mayor also have to realize they have uh, uh, climate change issues
Yes.
in their cities, and also political leaders also play part in this issue also. So this movement, I believe, should be the like a movement of everyone in this local area. So that's the key of success. Even though Jakarta also still struggling with that, but we are now realize that since the central government and every local government realize that the climate issues impact should be delivered in our planning. That's
Yeah. Yeah, that's a key takeaway, that every document and every aspect should cover the climate action. Thank you. And Professor Berkman, this is especially for you another question, that which factors and elements can be considered when we are talking about the urban adaptation planning framework for flood risk reduction, and how we can prevent vulnerable groups, or what actions we can take for vulnerable groups in that regard?
I mean, potentially it's a quite large portfolio what you can do. I mean, as my colleague from Jakarta indicated, definitely you have to make people aware at the political level. But at the same time, for example, you might have very different vulnerable groups. You have, on the one hand, poverty pockets like these informal settlements. You might have elderly population. Even if you're rich, then you might face various health risks during heat waves. So here, I think it makes a lot of sense if a city government, if cities also point towards these different groups and protection needs. And in addition, if they point to qualities, I mean, you don't want to live in a city where you can mainly lock yourself in a hotel with air conditioning and don't get out. The transport doesn't work. The roads are flooded, and then another heat stress comes. So this is not something where you can attract a lot of people. Last but not least, I think it's also important to think about time. I mean, we have talked about political priorities, but I think also in terms of investment, it's important. How long are certain infrastructures valid? So what is the lifespan of an infrastructure, a certain infrastructure, be it a dam, be it a water pump that dries areas that they don't get flooded constantly? And here I think that also other actors like insurance companies, but also big investors play a role. And if they would request, for example, a city government, if you want to have an investment of a major, whatever, automobile company or IT company, and they say we want to have a safe place for our employees plus for our company, then I think it's also an incentive for city governments to strongly think about how to better, what are issues around climate change and how do we protect people. But it should not mean that you mainly protect international businesses while you don't consider the local population. Maybe a last point, I think here also you mentioned that a master plan takes ages. I mean, if this master plan is then better than before, then it's maybe useful to take ages if you do something in between. But here I think also digitalization will modify things. It's not anymore that we have to have a big planning document of 200 pages and then the mayor says, thank you. It's potentially that you have also visible changes that you can communicate a certain new park infrastructure, transport-oriented development process. Here, these new communication tools will modify this, I think, the planning approach itself. Thank you.
Yeah,
I would
thank you,
actually
Professor.
have to leave also in 5 minutes, if that's okay. Then I have to teach here. My main job is teaching at the university here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. We'll not take much time of yours, and thank you for your inputs. And regarding the tools, there is PM Gati Shakti, another tool which India uses for this transportation and urban planning, which is a very quicker and cross-sectoral tool, which is helping in early development of all this. At the last few takeaways, I'll not put up a lot of questions regarding that. People have mentioned regarding the digitalization, that how the budget can be involved in that, and plus how we can involve media. These two are very critically linked, and a lot of efforts are to be dealt when we are talking about infodemic, when we are talking about misinformation. So in that case, the more academic and more research oriented information is easily accessible, the more real information or the more misinformation can be stopped. So thank you for all the time. Thank you, Professor Berkman. Thank you, Mr. Andhika. And thank you all the participants for posing up all the interesting questions. And since there are some questions which are left unanswered, we will try to answer them in offline mode. And regarding since the number of questions were huge, I think that it is all because of the interesting presentation of two experts. And we are delighted to have both the insights today, research-oriented scientific approach and the local level action-oriented approach, and how it is being dealt in the city level planning or the local level planning. So with this, we are able to conclude this webinar, and I'm highly grateful to all the participants and experts. The next webinar is scheduled on 29th of May, and the topic is unlocking the potential of gender equality, disability, and social inclusion for climate action. And for this webinar, presentation and materials will be available and will be circulated for the wider reach. And again, this is a part of webinar series under Urban Act project, and we are trying to improve the knowledge, and we are trying to exchange the experiences among different partners. Also, for all the participants, you can fill up the survey and the feedback survey, and after filling up the feedback survey, there will be a question session in the end of the survey form. Once you answer the questions, you will be eligible to get the certificate for this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you all the experts for your valuable time.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for the good moderation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Asita.
Thank you. Thank you so much.